Good morning, everyone. Good evening and good afternoon to everybody, and welcome to the New Energy Advancement Hub. My name is Tatiana Mitrova. I'm founder of the New Energy Advancement Hub, which is actually a platform focused on energy transition, educational and research platform based in Cyprus. And today we have a very interesting event focused on game-changing global energy dynamics. I have our speaker with us, who is joining already, Mehmet Ogutcu, who is chairman of Global Resources Partners based in UK and chairman of the London Energy Club, the Bosphorus Energy Club, non-executive board member in several international companies, and exceptional personality. I frankly love following his social media because it's a rare example of truly working work-life balance. Okay, so Mehmet, welcome to the New Energy Advancement Hub. It's a pleasure to have you here. And yeah, let's move in. It is really a fascinating topic, very controversial. And I will start with a very provocative question. Everybody is talking about energy transition and battle with the climate change. Is it real? Is it happening? What's your view?
Well, you started with a very difficult question, Tatiana. Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to join you. It's always a pleasure to share the same platform with you. Yes, this question is very important. How real energy transition is. We talk a lot about it. Green energy, climate change, efficiency, and lots of papers, European Union producing one after another, blueprints and visions. And we have COP28 finish and preparing now for COP29 in Baku, then Brazil will come. But in reality, what is really changing? That's the question. I think one simple statistic tells us everything, in my opinion. In today's world, in the energy mix, the share of fossil fuels is around 60 to 63%. And you cannot change this overnight from one day to another, neither from one decade to another. Because our whole industrial system, households, transportation, are based on fossil fuels. And all the optimistic scenarios even show that by 2050, 30 years from now, almost, will still be based on fossil fuels. And all other scenarios showing that, solar power will dominate the whole electricity generation is not realistic. EU, IEA are talking about tripling renewables energy share in power mix and also doubling energy efficiency efforts. These are all wonderful objectives. We all want that. Who doesn't want? Because we don't want our earth to be polluted and climate changing, but we have to be realistic as well. How this transition will be achieved? I think this question is left more or less unanswered. Yes, it's happening in the European Union countries, but the European Union is not the world. In terms of its share in the energy mix of the world and its power generation, its trade, yes, it's a huge power, economic power, also consuming so much energy. But if you ignore the rest of the world, some people call it a global south, you can't go anywhere because China is the number one carbon emitter in the world. Almost more than a third of world's carbon emissions come from China. US is the number two, less than half of China in many regards. If US and China are not taking action in the right direction, I think all other efforts will be fruitless. Yes, of course, drop by drop, it adds to the picture. However, I think there is a need for drastic change in this energy transition rhetoric. What do you need?
Yeah. What's the response? How can we address it?
How can we address it? I think number one is we need significant investment into infrastructure, logistics, not only power generation, but also grids and what you have. And is this money available? Yes, I mean, the world is flush with capital, but is it moving in the right direction? Let's say to developing countries? No. We preach them that they have to reduce carbon emissions, move into green energy, achieve a transformation in their industrial structures, yet how they are going to do it? Because even in their countries, more than 1 billion people have no access to commercial energy. I don't think that they have this discussion whether carbon emitting fossil fuels or green renewables. They want energy. And it's not available. Commercial energy is not available to them. So I think number one is first help these countries also build this infrastructure needed for renewables, for efficiency, for bringing also technology deployment in the right way. And secondly, renewable is not a panacea to everything. Now we realize increasingly that some of the renewables could also be dirty, in quotation marks, because we always call them clean energy, but they are less polluting, of course. We have to accept that, less polluting than coal, less polluting than oil and natural gas, perhaps. But they are using critical minerals and rare earth, which is concentrated now in one country. 60% is in China. The rest is distributed in Russia, Australia, South Africa, Argentina, and wherever you might find it. So therefore, again, we have the same problem, security of supply in oil and gas, but now security of supply in critical minerals, meaning lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, badly needed for renewable energy as well as electrical cars, space technology, and what you have. So it's not removing all these hurdles that we have. And third, of course, the government. We discussed before with you, what governments need to do is to provide the framework within which private players, NGOs, international organizations, banks, financial institutions could operate. Stability, rule of law, and also certainty. And so, I mean, there are many other issues, but if we ignore all of this and only focus, yes, we all want green energy. Also, I want to mention about the intergenerational gap. You and I, we are from the fossil fuel generation. We've grown up with that. We work in these industries. It doesn't mean that our minds are close to renewable energy and greening our planet. We want that, but we are more realistic, down-to-earth assessment. But new generation, talk to them. For them, fossil fuels are dirty. They don't want to get close to it. Everything should be green and impact investment. So investment will go to the green sector only, not the fossil fuels. But if we act like this in a very prejudiced way, and because we need energy, either fossil, renewable, and hydrogen, we need energy because population is increasing, middle class is growing up, and there will be more and more consumption coming, although not in the next few years, but in the future. And therefore, I think we have to understand that there has to be a smooth transition between fossil fuels and green energy. If you now clamp down on fossil fuels as dirty, bad fuel, don't put any penny, any dollar investment for future production, we will have serious shortcomings and scarcity down the road. 3 years, 4 years. If you don't invest in oil, if you don't invest in natural gas, what will happen? So renewable will not replace it right away because the share is still small. Even with renewables, you will need natural gas as a backup fuel. Therefore, I think, yes, I understand how important this transformation is, but I think we need also people who are cool-headed, who understand both sides of the coin and understand the realities on the ground, not only on paper. Because I work in the industry, I was with government, in diplomatic service, I work in IEA, so I know almost all sides of the coin, not only two sides, but 4 or 5 sides of the coin, the financial world, how investors are acting. Therefore, when you say how real transition is, yes, it is real, it is making headway, but let's not exaggerate. It's not going to overtake fossil fuels in the foreseeable future.
So, taking your point, there is a big gap between all these declarations which are made on different level international agencies, like national governments, NGOs, and we are all together calling for green transition. But in reality, it is actually lagging behind. It is not going with it. I mean, in certain extents, with the growth of EVs, for example, there was this exponential breakthrough in the last years, yeah, which was going far beyond all the previous projections. Yeah, but altogether, if we look at the share of renewables, it is still too small to speak about real transition. I'm comparing with the historical data of the first energy transition from wood and biomass to coal in mid-19th century, or second transition from coal to oil in the beginning of 20th century. And basically, the speed was much faster than everything we are observing right now with the transition to renewables. Yeah, it's a sad message. Yeah, because we all understand that we are not actually in time with decarbonization in order to achieve 1.5 degrees target. Yeah, and we see already this rising number of extreme weather events. And I mean, we all feel, I assume, climate change is already happening. And for me, it means also that with each year, we as humankind will have to spend more and more money, not only for mitigation, but also for adaptation, because we are too late. Yeah, but what do you think? I mean, there is another elephant in the room, which is ruining the whole concept, in my understanding, which is geopolitics. So if humankind was united, if there were like normal financial flows between the countries and technology transfer between the most developed economies and the developing countries, okay, there was a chance. But in the current world, which is real world, divided world, with a lot of conflicts and confrontations, actually the whole picture is becoming even more controversial. So what do you think about the role of geopolitics in the green transition these days in real politics?
Yeah, I remember actually Clinton, US President Clinton, saying that it is economy stupid. And now I think if he is in power, if he will be in power, he will say it's geopolitics stupid. Because geopolitics at that time took a backstage, and globalization, economic interactions, interests, and were more important than anything else. Right now, what we see is that geopolitics, especially conflictual geopolitics, are gaining ground, increasingly more and more. It makes us less hopeful about the prospect of a peaceful environment for our planet. I mean, look what's happening. Russian invasion of Ukraine, then Gaza, and then the massacre, first by Hamas, and then Israel in Gaza, and Red Sea crisis all of a sudden emerging. We thought that, the Gaza crisis will be contained. It's small and doesn't involve any big producers, but it immediately spread to Red Sea, and Houthis sending missiles and also drone attacks on ships, and making practically impossible to sail through Red Sea and the Suez Canal. And then, of course, the prospect of further conflict in East Asia is there. China, India, Iran, Pakistan exchange missiles, which I never expected will happen. In East Mediterranean, until a few years ago, there was a real prospect of conflict involving Turkey, Greece, South Cyprus, Egypt, and Israel, and French flotilla was sailing around. So in Africa, look at the conflict, Chad and other North African countries, Latin America, everywhere, and perhaps one day in Caspian, and China's ambitions in its own region. So wherever you turn, there are conflicts. Some of them hot, some of them are waiting in the freeze to be unfrozen when time comes. Therefore, it doesn't make us quite optimistic. So the internationally traded oil and gas started to be rerouted now because of the sanctions against Russia. Now, rather than to Europe, most of the Russian oil is moving to Asia Pacific. especially China and Russia, China and India, and where the prices have been dumped somehow at a heavy discount. So this changed the price structures in the market. This changed the international routes, and the risk for passing through Malacca Strait is really huge for China. That's the reason why Chinese PLA generals are really quite interested about the BRI, Belt and Road Initiative, providing an alternative route all the way through Central Asia, Caspian, Turkey to Europe. And there's also Arctic route discussions, and then the Chinese, of course, Silk Road all the way going to Oman, Pakistan Economic Corridor, and then at the latest G20 summit in Mumbai, what they talk, creating a corridor from Mumbai to Dubai, Riyadh, then through Jordan to Israel, from Israel to the Greek port of Piraeus, and then to Europe. So there are so many different corridors, routes being discussed. So I don't think that there is a stability in the international market, neither for energy supply, nor for transportation, nor for the security of shipping routes. Therefore, geopolitics will continue to be with us, even, because we were talking about the new geopolitics of renewable, quite different from the fossil fuel geopolitics. Now, added to this is the geopolitics of critical minerals and rare earth, which are concentrated in several countries which might be hostile to the West. Actually, the other day, I was listening to the US Secretary of Energy talking at the IEA Ministerial, and she said, we are seriously worried about being so dependent, over-dependent for our critical minerals on a country which doesn't share the same values with us, meaning China. So now we have the values also included in the energy equation.
Supply chain, yeah.
In the supply chain. So also, when I look at the geopolitical tensions and conflicts, I usually ask the question to myself, who wins there? Who gains from these conflicts? I think if you look at the Russia-Ukraine, then EU triangular relationship and conflicts involved and sanctions, whatever you have, definitely Ukraine is losing out. Russia also lost because of diverting its trade. US is gaining. And US is providing enormous amounts of LNG to European markets, for which they already fought in the past with Russia. And Russia also started sending LNG now, which is not included, I guess, in the sanctions regime. And but in the Middle East, what's going to happen to the Gulf? Because Gulf's relationship with China now more important than its relationship with the US. Yeah. Russia is number one partner for Saudi Arabia in the OPEC Plus. Without Russia, I don't think that the Saudi influence in the oil markets will be as strong as it used to be. Then Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Kuwait, Iraq, Iran, their number one buyers are China and India. So therefore, there is a shift, tectonic shift in terms of where the energy is flowing, where investment is coming, and IOCs, Chevrons, Seven Sisters, as we used to call them, ExxonMobil, Chevron, Shell, BP, and Total. Now, more and more NOCs, national oil companies, which control the bulk of the reserves in the world, are having the upper hand. They do the most of the investment, technology deployment, and production. And slowly, if these IOCs don't transform themselves, like the Norwegian Statoil did to Equinor, and they will also be dead in the next couple of decades, not from today to tomorrow. Just like what happened to Kodak in the film industry. And therefore, I think we are in a period where geopolitics matter a lot, but also I want to mention the speed of the game. I think the game is about speed. Things are happening so fast now, thanks to technology, quick decision-making, agility. Because before we were saying that any investment in the energy industry would need a lead time of at least 15, 20 years to get the results. Right now, things are happening so quickly. Shale producers in the US, they look at the market, demand, supply, price, they bring the production down or bring it up, depending on the situation. Very quickly they do these things. And, in Saudi Arabia, it's not only the world's largest almost exporter of oil with also spare capacity, although they don't want to be a swing player, as the Saudi minister said, but they are going to become a very, very important player in green energy as well. They invest heavily in renewables, green hydrogen, more than any other country putting money into this. So game has changed, players of the game and the rules of the game have changed as well.
That's an important message. Okay, so let's take a look at the key players and the key actors of this game. I think we should start with China. It's the largest emittent, it's the largest producer of basically everything related to new energies. Yeah, and it is also it's becoming a key power on geopolitical arena. So how is China reshaping global energy markets in your understanding?
Well, there's no doubt that China is a rising power in many regards, energy, as you said, being one of them, because they are the top producer, not only oil and gas, of course. In oil, they are, I think, fourth, and in natural gas, they are fourth. I think in oil, they are sixth largest producer, but coal is number one, of course. And I served in China as a diplomat. Then I created also IEA's China program of cooperation in the past and worked with OECD's China investments. So I speak also Mandarin. I have lots of understanding and inner workings of China and insights. I was there a couple of months ago as well, again, to discuss some energy business together with them. What I see that China clearly recognized they are number one in energy. They are not as a producer, of course, but as a consumer, more importantly, because to keep the China machine working, you need to fuel it, because China imports almost 85% of its crude oil needs, almost 14.5 million barrels per day they consume. And then also in the natural gas, almost 40% will be imported from abroad. So they have a heavy dependency on imports. So they want to diversify source of their energy, as every country is trying to do if you are so dependent on them. But China is also world leader in renewables. Put together, they spent on R&D and technology for renewables more than US and European Union combined. Just like they are number one in artificial intelligence, they are number one in electrical vehicles and batteries, and better than Tesla in many regards as well. Therefore, I think China has to be watched very carefully. And also, I remember that when I wrote a book about China's energy security cast worldwide, a Chinese ambassador in Paris protested. This was probably 20 plus years ago. He said, "You are trying to show us as a power destabilizing world oil markets." And at that time, I was projecting something like 7 million barrel per day consumption in China, some part of it coming from the international markets. Today, it's 14.5. So it wasn't a conspiracy, it was just a projection. But Chinese are very careful in making clear that they are not a destabilizing force, because they need the international oil, gas, coal markets to depend on them. And however, I think they are also very careful. They are a great bargainer as well, because as we've seen with Russians, so understanding the vulnerability of Russia at this particular time in history, they negotiated very good deals, both for Siberian natural gas as well as for the crude oil coming from Russia. So they do this with also Gulf nations. One clear emerging principle they have now, they don't want to spend money on that.
Oh, it's a big change, I would say, compared to like 15 years back.
Yes, they don't want to pay for it. I said, how are you going to secure the supplies then? They said, very simple. We want to get their supplies. In return, we want to provide our construction infrastructure services and materials. So it will be like a swap somehow. So they need what we have, and we need what they have. Rather than trading on the basis of US dollars, let's do it through our local currencies, or we provide them what they need in terms of roads and stadiums and pipelines and building cities, housing. And I don't know whether it's going to work, but this is the clear strategy in China now, because they are lacking some foreign exchange. And here I want to come to the difficult position China is in, because US is making quite clear that they will contain China before they become too strong to challenge them. I mean, in my opinion, China is already the world's economic superpower. When I say China, I don't mean only People's Republic of China. Add to this Hong Kong, Taiwan, then those countries where Chinese elites run the economy, Malaysia, Thailand, and Indonesia, Singapore, of course, that all this greater China economic area is definitely more powerful than the US or European Union in economic terms. But China, of course, doesn't have the military muscles yet to flex, and they have this 2049 strategy of rising peacefully, so that they don't want to have any conflict, they don't want to have any tension until such time that they consolidate their economic power and military position in the world system. 1 in every 5 is Chinese. Let's not forget about that. Now I think we have to say the same thing for India, because Indian population, as you know, exceeded that of China early this year. So these two powers put together, almost 1 in every 2.5 person in the world are either Chinese or Indian. So they are looking for a place in the world system, in world governance as well. We have to make room for them. If we don't, because they want to muscle themselves. Yeah, they will make themselves. Look, the BRICS and Shanghai Cooperation Organization, they create their own organizations. Or Asia Infrastructure and Development Bank in Beijing. And I think if we want a peaceful world, if we want prosperity spreading around the world, if we want to fight climate change and also have energy serve as a peace bridge for peace, then you have to bring these powers in on equal basis, rather than treating them as second-rate members of the international community. Because now they also have economic power, increasingly military power, and technology power, trade power. And otherwise, I think this world will be ridden with conflict all the time, unless we have such understanding at the highest level in the West, especially.
And going to the West, what do you think about the US position in this changing global energy arena? So the US is like the biggest superpower, both in economic and energy terms, geopolitically. Observing US domestic situation, I think the whole world feels a bit frustrated. What the hell is going on? Yeah, and the future elections, it's a big question mark for all observers. But basically, the US is sending also quite controversial signals with its domestic energy policy. And what do you think will be the US role in the energy transition and more broadly in the whole energy dynamics?
Well, if Trump is going to come back, all indications show that if it happens, and still we have time unless something drastic doesn't happen, Trump might be coming back to the White House. His previous energy strategy was global dominance in energy. And so that's the reason why he stepped up also shale oil and shale gas production in the US. Now we see a process of gasification of the US economy in transportation, houses, power generation, everywhere else. Nuclear is still there. And thanks to shale oil and shale gas revolution, and US has achieved some sort of energy autonomy, independence. If there is anything missing, I think they turn their face not to Saudi Arabia or Kuwait in Iraq. They look into Canada, Mexico, even Venezuela, even at a time when they were arch enemies, and U.S. traded with Venezuela somehow because their refineries are fit for Venezuelan heavy crude. And so U.S. would like to have Europe to be relieved of dependence on Russia for perhaps strategic reasons, but also for its own commercial interests. Because when Russian oil, Russian gas especially, is removed from the European Union market, what we saw, the LNG coming, not always fully covering it. Of course, Europe has to look still to other places for LNG. Its goal is total, of course, greening of energy supply. It's not going to happen soon. Now, the share of, I think, renewables in power generation is from 40 to 70%. And Iceland, perhaps in Europe, is an exception. They're 100%, but not every country has the same luxury as Iceland. And therefore, US is also investing in certain states in renewables, like, sunshine states, where you have the photovoltaic solar, and technologies are quite adamant there. But US will be a fossil fuel-based economy for a long time to come, in my opinion. And also its efforts to join the international community for climate change, thanks to John Kerry. He was the special envoy for climate change, as you remember, the former Secretary of Foreign Affairs, in the Secretary of State in the US. And I think it is diverging from the European Union. I don't think EU and US are seeing eye to eye on energy matters. Europe is more greener than US in many regards, paying more attention to climate change than US is doing. So US will be looking after its own affairs. As Trump says, we will make US great again, great in whatever it is doing in terms of energy, but also they want to have a say in world energy markets, because it affects, no matter how self-sufficient it is, in certain regards, US will be affected by dynamics in world energy markets, put so much pressure on Saudi Arabia, as you remember, for increasing production so that the prices will come down, especially in election year. It didn't work. And Mohammed bin Salman instead had a handshake with his Russian counterpart and other OPEC nations, and they didn't give in to the US pressure. So therefore, there is a dramatic change in this regard as well. There are no longer the bossing around the major producer, even in order to balance, of course, Russia somehow and give some more options to Europeans. US even sat on the table with Venezuela and Iran, discussing the possibility of them perhaps selectively easing sanctions so that there will be more oil flowing into international market. Right now, yes, I think the supply situation is very good because demand is not increasing as expected. And there is a, I think, also a concern among oil producers. I was talking to the executives of Chevron, ExxonMobil, Total, and now they are looking for low-price oil assets below $25, $30. I think offshore oil production now will be for a long time delayed. And Saudi Arabia also, I think, delayed some of the expansion projects, thinking that demand weakening will continue for some time.
So this seems to be a big change, I assume. And I wonder, with the US, with the Inflation Reduction Act, so there seems to be an ambition on the US side, not only to be self-sufficient, which they've more or less achieved, but also to take a lead in the green transition on the technology side. So maybe a sort of competition with China, a sort of competition with the EU. What do you think this tension between the leading powers on this technology race, yeah, and this rivalry for being the key batteries producer or EVs producer or whatever your relationship, and most importantly, the transition itself.
Yes, I mean, as we discussed, technology is fast developing. We can't keep up pace with this. I mean, you bought your iPhone 13, now iPhone 14, next year iPhone 15. Which one are you going to buy? Are you going to wait for the new to come? And so technology also is a disruptive force, in my opinion, because you make all your calculations on the basis of the fact that you will use this technology for a certain time, then amortissement will come. And whereas one after another, new technologies are coming and revolutionizing the place at a very fast pace. And if the governments are not somehow involved in that, I think the markets will do it well with technology. But now US, China, European unions are introducing bans, export bans, and technology transfer, Huawei system, 5G, we saw that, artificial intelligence, because technology is also becoming an instrument of warfare. Now, perhaps we don't need F-35s, S-400s, this conventional weapons which we use, tanks and what you have. Perhaps in small proximity warfare, you might need it, but for big powers, it's no longer about the conventional warfare. We use trade, we use technology, currency, and even bio warfare. And in that regard, I think the Third World War already started. It's not going to be declared, but it's already there. Nations are fighting. In the future, perhaps there will be more fights, not only on energy, but also on water, than the critical minerals, wherever they are. Governments will change. Coup d'etats will come. So I'm a bit pessimistic, perhaps, but I always see a glass half full. Technology will also bring us blessings. So if it's left to the private sector and governments only provide the framework, regulatory framework, enabling framework, I think it will develop better for the humanity. But I'm not that optimistic in that regard, because technology has become a weapon, a force in the hands of governments as well. So yes, in the US, there is this new act which will encourage renewable deployment, and we will see to what extent US will be able to finance it. Yes, some funds have already been reserved for this purpose, but US economy is not doing well in that regard. So there will be always, in the EU also, we have a similar problem. So hundreds of billions of dollars of Green Deal projects and the finances. But when you look at the real situation, not so much money flowing to the real projects. I was talking to IRENA, and as you know, Abu Dhabi, the Renewable Energy Agency, and they said they created a fund for renewable projects, and fund not only member countries, but also private equities and other financial groups came, and quite a good amount of fund. But all the projects coming to us for renewables, we fund only less than 5% because they are not eligible. I think this is a situation in many developing countries.
That's my key question. Yeah, that's exactly what I see on the ground. And I know many people who are trying to invest in, let's say, solar or wind, but actually it's really difficult to find the projects, to go through all the permitting process, which it is a disaster, I think, basically everywhere around the world. And the grid connections, and all these stuff which is on the state side, which is about creating framework. But my question here is, so what could be done quickly to remove these burdens and barriers, and to really allow, you said the markets can solve it. There is enough money globally to fund all these renewable developments. But what should be done to allow these money to flow? Because, there are not enough projects, like good projects for financing. So how can they be created? What should happen for them to suddenly appear on the market?
Well, I'm on the board of a renewable company, a big one, and we have lots of money to spend. And the priority is the EU market because it's geopolitically less risky, and there are so much EU funds, subsidies to help you go through, and there is also level playing somehow, and the market is there, price is good. So why should I go and invest it in Bangladesh or in Nigeria or in Mozambique, where the rule of law is not so much fixed? And corruption, bribery, lots of risk which I cannot mitigate against. Therefore, I think the number one issue is to make sure that internationally there are ground rules to respect. Because if we really want climate change and green transition improvement, and we have to make sure that all around the world we have more or less the same rules. But then the sovereignty issue comes into play. How come you can come and interfere in my domestic system? But if we stick by your domestic system, which is full of bureaucratic barriers, corruption, bribery, and strategic sectors, rightly or wrongly.
And localization.
Localization, local content, and then how are you going to operate? Therefore, it's easier said than. Yes, in developed countries, more or less is happening. In EU, in also China, perhaps, a central government making it obligatory. They take decisions at the central level and provinces have to implement it. It is happening. They have the funds. They provide also enabling environment. I think many people look down China. It's a communist nation and it's totalitarian. There is no market economy and democracy, but they are operating much better than most Western economies. And if you look at the eastern seaboard of China, where you have Guangzhou and Tianjin, Shanghai, all this coastline, Fujian, and their per capita income higher than in Spain. And,
really? I didn't know.
And also no longer is a country where you have cheap labor, cheap raw materials, cheap energy. So you produce not so good products, not good quality. Oh, it's Chinese made. But now, be in textile, the best designs, artificial intelligence, machinery, cars, I think they are doing much better than others. They followed the same path as Japan and Korea did, and copy and then develop your own. So therefore, they want to protect also their own technology now, as the West used to do, IPR, intellectual property right. We insisted so much when I was in OECD, you have to respect IPR. Now Chinese are saying you have to respect our technology, IPR. And therefore, I think it's not easy, but through perhaps IRENA or another organization, I don't know, to make sure to show the way to countries. It's not only preaching, because when I used to go on behalf of OECD to China, India, and other developing countries, they said, yeah, fine, we know all these things, but we need technology at low cost. We need funding. Are you going to help us on that? It's easy to give advice. So we can give you advice as well. We'll listen to you with respect, but we know what needs to be done. In order to do this, we need more finance. We need more technical know-how and technology. If you are serious about reducing global warming and combat climate change, you have to come with this. And now in the last, COP in UAE, discussed so many things. Hopes were high that there will be a solution to financing, but there was a sentence saying that this issue will be discussed in Baku. Now in Baku, probably there will be a coach. Yes, we discussed this at length, but we refer to the Brazilian meeting, COP30, so it will be taken up. Nobody wants to sacrifice on that, and there are no international funds. There are some, but small and difficult to access. I think these are the critical issues. Leave aside the rhetoric. We all know we need renewables, more and more renewables, also efficiency and transformation in the industry. However, how to do it? We can't do it alone, they say. Are you going to stand by and help them? And so I think that's the critical thing to do. It's easy to talk and produce tons of papers, which is not helping climate as well.
Not at all.
At all. So actions speak louder than words.
talking about actions and financing, I think it's probably the most sensitive issue. And differently from the declarations, it's about money. And something that people prefer to keep closer to themselves. And nobody is ready to just provide free funding, free lunch. Yeah. With the renewables, you've mentioned that you are on the boards of different companies related to this business. Several years ago, it was quite visible that returns on renewable investments were significantly lower than returns on fossil fuels investments. Is it still the case, or did it change during the past few years? And how do you see these investors' interest? Yeah, so is renewable segment or clean energy segment something really appealing for them, or are they still like scratching their heads thinking whether we should go there or not, or maybe we should keep just a small fraction of our portfolio just to demonstrate that we are ESG friendly, but basically we will still make money on oil?
I think that's a very good point because, in the past, as you say, there were government guarantees, tariffs for 10 years. So a fixed price. So you produce and we'll buy 10 years. This is a long-term purchase agreement. And then it was guaranteed. You invest whatever cost, and then you add to this, you make your calculation. It was quite profitable. Those who did this initial investment are now still counting their dollars in their hands and wherever they are keeping the money. And they invested this money elsewhere, actually, not again back to the renewable energy. And at the time, per kilowatt hour, cost was something like 18 cents. But now it's about 2 cents, 3 cents in Portugal and in Morocco. And therefore, less and less the cost is very competitive with other fuel types as well. And but then, because of this competition, and the governments are also phasing out subsidies and preferential tariffs, and then it becomes very competitive and tough. And if you don't have the government guarantee for 10 years, 15 years, then the banks will not be extending credit to you. And where are you going to find the money? And so the calculations have become more and more difficult. Yes, it was easy to make money in the initial stages, but now it's getting quite difficult unless it's large scale. Because we always say small is beautiful, because you can have your own automated energy system on your roof or on your balcony for the especially photovoltaic solar. And but increasingly scale is growing bigger and bigger. And also in terms of the panels, soon they could become junk as well, because you invest heavily for photovoltaic solar panels or wind turbines, and then 3-4 years down the road, you have a new technology, much efficient, higher efficiency, lower cost. What are you going to do? Will you continue with the old technology, which hasn't paid yet? You need another 10-15 years, or you will immediately shift to the new technology, which will be also demodded in 3 years. So that's the reason why I say there's a technology as a disruptive force argument here. But short answer to your question, renewables are not as profitable as they used to be. There are now many uncertainties, including supply security for critical minerals used in renewables. And therefore, only European and US companies are able to do this. Some of them are also going under the table or going red, declaring bankruptcy. And but always the European Investment Bank, EBRD, and others, national governments come in and support them. But we don't have the same luxury. If I invest in Namibia, Bangladesh, or Tajikistan, or Peru, and how it's going to happen. Therefore, I think it looks as if it's a fantasy for some of the developing countries, especially least developed countries, to talk about the green transformation, because they don't even have access to commercial energy in many regards. So this is their priority.
So look, we get then quite a controversial picture. On one hand, renewable investments, especially in the locations where the main demand is coming from, in the developing countries, it is constrained by the low returns, security issues, especially with critical minerals, and unavailability of proper financial frameworks. And proper institutional frameworks guaranteeing those investments. At the same time, investments in the fossil fuels, they are also significantly undermined during the past, let's say, 5 years, because everybody is talking about peak oil demand. Everybody is talking about this potential phase out of coal, oil, gas, everything. So any reasonable investor looking at the fossil fuels will think twice whether to go there or not, given the payback period of, let's say, 20, 30 years. So you have to be sure that your investments will be paid back. And it means that nobody wants to invest in any energy. Is it like a correct vision, or am I exaggerating the picture?
I think you connected the dots very well.
So
yes, I mean,
what does it mean?
Yes, it's not a good news. It's not good news. I hope we don't have to doing the COVID time. I remember that the Swiss Minister of Energy was saying that be prepared. After also Russia, European Union quarrel about the natural gas cut and disruption, Swiss Minister of Energy was saying that be prepared to burn wood again in your fireplace for warming up, because we will not have gas. And I hope such things will not happen at the global level. And developing countries already find their own way, because they will never be without energy, biomass, wood, and coal, whatever they will use it. But for the mass consumption in Western economies, OECD economies especially, there will be serious difficulties. As you rightly connected the dots, and there will be less and less investment in fossil fuels because there is no money flowing. Right now, all the money coming to this industry are from the coffers of the oil and gas companies. They use their own funds, savings. They don't distribute dividends, perhaps. But this will come to an end as well at some point. And especially if the prices will go down as expected. And IEA is fueling the fire somehow, saying that there will be, oil, as you said, will be peaking from 2030 onwards, oil demand growth. And whereas OPEC says the other way around. And there's a huge difference between their projections, 2.5 million barrels next year more oil. The OPEC says, IEA said 1 point something. So huge difference between the two. But, these are politically influenced organizations as well. They may have an agenda, their own agenda, represented by their own governments, of course, member governments. But as an investor, as a company, as a financier, when I hear such things, I will hesitate. Look, I can't put a penny to any fossil fuels because my shareholders will punish me later. I can't do this because it's not ethical. I can't do this because it's against the real situation, green energy, climate change. We have a responsibility towards our societies. So all these arguments. Then what will happen? There will be a crunch, supply crunch down the road. Not long time, 3 years, 4 years. We will have a serious problem there. Then on the renewables, yes, everybody says drumming up, let's invest more in renewables. Last year, $2.8 trillion invested globally in energy industry, and 2/3 went to renewables. But this is all in the Western countries. Yes, they will perhaps green themselves somehow, better than the rest of the world, but it will be an isolated island. What will happen to the rest? The rest is producing more and more carbon emissions. The rest is having more and more demand for energy. So there will be a disequilibrium in the world, haves and have-nots. And this is also a source of tension, political tension, military tension, security tension, environment tension. Then add to this food and water security and energy, these three of them coming together and we'll have a very, I mean, I don't want to be pessimistic, but unless, we need to have a cold shower as well. It's good to say nice words. Yeah, I mean, we can 100% green the planet, everything will be all right. No, we have to see the reality. I think it is our responsibility, your, mine, and others, understanding this industry and also interrelationship between them, how governments operate, private sector, bankers, the aspirations of developing countries, technology, financing abilities, all of them put together, we can assess really what's really happening. So I think, again, coming back to your first question, how real it is. So it's not that real.
Yeah. I have a question from the audience. Is there any sense to make forecasts in such an uncertainty? Plenty of factors and black swans possibility. And how to forecast the future energy development? What do you think?
I love this question because, I asked this question when I was working in the IEA as well. We were projecting into, when was that? I think it was in 1994 I joined, until 2000 something I was there. And I always ask my question, my God, they are making a projection to 2030, 2040. Perhaps we will not be alive by then. And these projections, if they are wrong, nobody will blame us. And most of the projections forecasts have not come true. But we need a sense of direction, not relying only on one organization, IEA, OPEC, or World Bank, but also you have private companies, consultancy groups, and each company, BP has its own outlook, and Chevron, ExxonMobil. I think our duty is somehow cross-check all of them and have our own also assessments and come to a conclusion, which may be rubbish perhaps down the road 5 years later, because things are changing so fast. But still we need the forecast. We need to have scenarios based on different assumptions. Otherwise, we will have no tools in our hands about deciding on investment. Also risks. I mean, I think I also have a company dealing with global risks, political, environmental, financial, and our business is growing so fast because there's so much risk. It's good for us, for business, it's bad for the world. So much risk to deal with, mitigate against, and unfortunately, that's the situation. So forecasting is not easy, but it's a must. We have to do it.
I completely agree.
In our personal life as well, each year we have a wish list, what we are going to do in 2024. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. At the end of the year, this year I did it. I had a look. Oh my God, I didn't even do one of them. I said, at least I should have paid more attention to one of them. So we forecast for ourselves as well, and we don't manage how to reach it. But still, it's good to have it.
Yeah, it's a sort of discipline, and at least it gives some direction, where to focus, where to pay attention. Mehmet, we are approaching to the end of our conversation, but I still want to ask one more question. Yeah, Turkey. Yeah, we didn't talk about Turkey and its energy outlook and its regional hub ambitions, and you are a great specialist in this part of the world. So what do you think?
Well, of course, Turkey is my passion, my own home country. And I think Turkey is doing well in many regards. Politically, we have serious problems domestically in foreign policy. But in terms of energy policies, and Turkey has managed to diversify its energy portfolio, because Turkey is a country which is heavily dependent on external supplies, 98% in natural gas and 94% in oil. Although there are signs that Turkey might be producing its own natural gas in Black Sea and southeastern Turkey for oil. However, the reality is we still depend heavily. And it is almost $100 billion we spend on it, and the current account deficit is largely due to that. But Turkey invested heavily in renewables, since we don't have fossil fuels so much in the country. And any reduction in fossil fuel import is a big plus for the economy. So right now, I think Turkey is one of the most successful among European countries. 54% of installed capacity in power generation is now renewables. Initially, it was so much wind power, but now increasing the photovoltaic, of course, biomass. Geothermal is Turkey, I think, around in the world, second or third. Also, funding-wise, yes, like any other country, Turkey has difficulty, but it's managing it. And the regional hub is an ambition Turkey had for a long time, from the time of the Baku-Tbilisi-Ceyhan pipeline. At that time, I was in the Foreign Office, and I was involved in the negotiations. It was dealt as if it was a soccer match. Russians will lose, we will win, type of. And the Western powers show that this will be only non-Russian pipeline coming out of the former Soviet Union. And but still, Turkey is not a hub. Turkey is a very good customer of Russian gas, Azeri gas coming through TANAP, and Russian gas coming through Blue Stream 1, 2, and also Turk Stream 1, 2, and then Iranian gas coming through from Erzincan. And Turkey also has built a huge LNG capacity. Almost a third of its natural gas needs now provided by LNG, and mostly by the US LNG, interestingly, all the way coming from Charles Lake and elsewhere in the US. So technology-wise, I don't think Turkey is a technology producer, developer, but it has very strong companies now building renewable projects in the neighboring countries. And I think energy collaboration is the backbone of Turkish foreign and security policy as well, with regard to Russia, Iran, Azerbaijan, perhaps in the future from the Kurdish region of Iraq, where oil flows to Turkey and Ceyhan to the international markets. Perhaps one day natural gas, much cheaper than the Russian, Iranian, or Azeri gas, might come also from that. EastMed, of course, Turkey has ambitions. Turkey has its own exclusive economic zone, clashing with South Cyprus, Greece, Egypt, and Israel. But probably Turkey will be addressing these issues successfully with Egypt after the recent visit by Erdogan to Cairo and hugging Sisi, with whom he exchanged not so pleasant words in the past. But this is the policy of new rapprochement Turkey is having with Gulf nations, perhaps with Syria at some point, with Russian intermediation. And with Israel, things were going so well until, what happened, Hamas attack, and then following Israel attack on Gaza. But I think things will change again, because we are in a region where sands are shifting all the time. And today's enemy becomes tomorrow's friend, and today's partner becomes a rival. I think we have to manage our relationship successfully. And also, I think there is a lack of Turkish corporate presence in the neighboring countries, although Turkey is a huge producer of hydro and renewable now, and also significant consumer, almost 60 BCM of gas per year. But there are not enough Turkish companies, Turkish energy champions we need domestically as well as for investment across. Turkey could be a hub one day. It's not now, because Turkey is a transit country right now. And Putin was talking about perhaps Turkey could be a hub for Russian gas to Europe, but I think it's not going to happen anytime soon. If he came with this proposal 10 years ago, I think this will be most welcome in Europe and Turkey. But right now, I don't think Europe will buy through Turkey if it's not buying through Ukraine and under the Baltics. So there is much room for interconnectivity as well, power generation to Europe, to Middle East, and this is another area of collaboration. And energy efficiency, there is room to improve. It's, I think, one way of energy security as well. In certain sectors, we can improve energy efficiency by 30%. That means 30% reduction of your demand.
Wow, Mehmet, It was a fascinating discussion. Thank you. And I hope that we've covered many issues. We didn't go deep into detail, but I assume if we had like 10 hours, we could speak for 10 hours. Yeah. But I hope that we've initiated with these controversial issues, with these thought-provoking questions, some thinking among our audience. Yeah, it's not a rosy picture at all. It's going to be quite a difficult and bumpy road, unfortunately, most likely. Yeah, we might not like it, but nobody is asking us. But at the same time, I completely agree with your message that it's very important to keep an eye on all these developments because the things are changing so fast, and to dig into all the aspects, technological, financial, regulatory, and so on, and geopolitical, obviously, in order to understand whether this whole very fragile system is moving. So thank you for this fascinating tour. Thank you for raising all these questions. And well, I hope we will stay in touch because there are still so many things left to discuss.
Definitely. It's always a pleasure talking to you and to your audience, of course. And you ask very provocative questions and made me answer them. Not in a politically correct way, but right as I believe.
That we really appreciate your openness, and yeah, thank you for being with us, and have a nice week, and see you during our next event. Bye bye.
Bye-bye.